Welcome back, folks, to the WP-Tonic show. It's episode 307. I've got my co-host, Kim Shivler, and we've got a fantastic guest, David Caverly. And David, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Hello, everybody. I'm just sharing this out on Twitter right now. I'm David Kadavy. I'm a creative entrepreneur, which to me means that I try to creatively express myself while at the same time building businesses. So a few things that I have going on. I've got a book called Design for Hackers, where I reverse engineer visual design aimed mostly at software developers or people who don't consider themselves designers so much. I have a podcast called Love Your Work. I've interviewed Seth Godin and James Altucher, Jason Fried, anybody you can imagine, really, screenplay writers, chefs, rock stars on that show. And then I've also been on a self-publishing frenzy lately. I've self-published 3 books in the last 6 months: The Heart to Start, How to Write a Book, and another book about a blockchain technology called Steam It.
That's great. Dave, to say David is a man of many talents would be understatement. And Kim, would you like to quickly introduce yourself to the listeners and viewers?
Absolutely. I'm Kim Shivler. I'm a trainer in the communications area and instructional design consultant. You can find me at kimshivler.com.
That's great. And I'm the founder of WP-Tonic. We're specialize in the maintenance of WordPress websites, support and maintenance, with emphasis on learning management systems and membership websites. We love to help you. Before we go into the main part of this interview, folks, I just want to talk about one of our great sponsors. That would be Lifter NMS. Lifter NMS is one of the leading WordPress plugin solutions if you're looking to build a learning management system with your WordPress website. Great team, really believe in support. They are pushing the boundaries of learning management systems almost every month, really building out fantastic functionality. You can get the core of the program for just $1. They offer additional functionality through add-on packs, and they're giving a special discount to the WP-Tonic listeners and viewers. If you go to their website and use WP-Tonic, all one word, you get 15% on any of the add-ons that they have in their store. That's not a bad offer, is it? I suggest if you're interested in that for yourself or for one of your clients, you go over and try it out. So let's go straight into it, David. One of the books that you've recently built is giving advice about, you got like a course. Let's say you got this great idea for this course, based on your experience, but you just can't get it going. You just can't get it started. What's your insights about that, basically, David?
Yeah, this is something that I have thought about a lot, which is why I wrote the book. And, in some ways it's for my 25-year-old self. In some ways it's for my present and future self. It's called The Heart to Start. It's interesting that there is a type of procrastination. We normally think of procrastination as like something that you don't want to do. But you can also be procrastinating on something that you really want to do, something that's so important to your existence that you feel it welling up inside of you, but you just can't actually make it happen. So that could be like a course, or you're trying to build a membership website, or you want to write a book or something like that. And this is something I struggled with a lot, especially early on as an entrepreneur. I was often getting this advice. People would say, "Oh, just get started. It's just get started." And it's usually you hear this from experienced people who already have a lot of stuff under their belt. And what I usually find out when I would dig deeper was that I think there's 2 different types of people in a way. There's some people who do have not much of a problem just starting something and deciding, they have an idea, they're just going to go with it. I'm not like that. I grew up in a place where I didn't know people who were writing books or starting companies or building video games or things like that. I didn't even understand that like flesh and blood people made those things. And so this is what I've been learning over the years is that yes, the advice to just get started is good advice, but it's not that straightforward to do it. Like, how do you get started? Where do you find the internal fuel to get started? How do you get past things like perfectionism and anxiety about fear of failure and things like that? And so that's what I really wanted to explore in this book, not only through my own experiences, but also through the experience of lots of guests that have been on my podcasts and great creators throughout time. So that is what I have been thinking about, and that's what I'm talking about in this book.
Oh, sounds great. Got a question, Kim?
Several. One of the things that excited me about this book is you're actually giving people, I want to say trying, but you're actually giving people kind of a step-by-step way to get started. Because I think you're right. People say just get started, but if you don't know how, it's like saying just ride the bike if you're sitting in front of a bike for the first time and you don't know what to do. So the clients I work with a lot of times are a little bit on the other side, and I'd like to hear your feedback. Maybe I haven't gotten far enough in the book. They've gotten started. Maybe they've even created it. But their pushback, their resistance is actually pressing publish and starting to market it because there's a big vulnerability there. What would you teach them?
Yeah, and that's a great question because, you know, you're always starting. You're starting like the company, or you're starting the book, but you're also starting in between different sessions, and you're starting between shipping this piece and shipping that piece. And when it comes to, I think that you can get in this perfection paralysis. Is that kind of like what you think is going on with your clients? Is that they're trying to tweak all these little things, and they want to get it just perfect before they get it out there? Is that kind of what's going on?
I think sometimes that's going on, but I tend to think that the root cause is fear of rejection.
Yeah.
We can always want to, but why do we want to perfect? Why do we want to do it? Even if we've built the whole thing, and I was really bad about this when I was younger. I've probably got 20 books sitting on a shelf that have never been published, and sadly, because at the time I was a technology writer, they're no longer relevant. But it's actually it's when you actually push it out to the world that now you are vulnerable for the feedback and helping them get over that fear. Because as a creator, we're not just building, maybe somebody's bookkeeping system or IT system when I was in IT, but we're actually putting our heart on the line a lot of times.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because your creative work is so personal. It comes from a very personal place. It comes from, for whatever reason, you feel compelled to say, write this particular book because of your past experiences, and you're putting it out there, and you're going to get criticism, or you're definitely going to find that there's always going to be things where you're like, that could have been better as well. And I think that it's helpful to just recognize that a lot of this procrastination is really just us wanting to feel good about ourselves. Mm-hmm. It's that conflict, the classic conflict between ego and self. I'm borrowing a bit from Stephen Pressfield, The War of Art here. He says that, you've got two lives. You've got the life that you're living, and then you have the unlived life inside of you. And in between those two things is resistance. And so, I think of any sort of creative endeavor as like self-actualization. You're going to take your experiences, you're going to take your passions, you're going to take you, and you're going to inject it into this thing, and you're going to put it out into the world. Now, your ego doesn't really like that, because your ego wants you to feel good. It wants to protect the self. So when you do put something out there that isn't up to your standards, or that you do get criticized, or you feel like your friends are laughing at you behind your back or something like that, or it can cause you to criticize other people. You can say like, well, I'm not going to stoop to that level. I'm not going to do crappy work like that person does, because I'm better than that. And so it does all these things to help us feel better about ourselves, that, oh, well, we have high standards, so we still need to learn more. We're not going to stoop to that level of low level of quality. All these things that are going on that are really just trying to protect the ego. Now, so how is the ego trying to protect the self, really? So how do you get past that? That's also a little bit easier said than done. It helps to recognize it, but there's little things you can do. One, I like, for example, to give myself permission to lower my standards sometimes, to
Nice.
give yourself permission to suck. It sounds like a really terrible thing. Well, you're going to do bad work, but oftentimes you find that if you give yourself permission to do work that you think sucks to start with anyway, at least like that's the permission you're giving yourself, that work ends up being better than the non-existent work that you wouldn't have done had you not given yourself that permission. And you can't get good at something without being bad at it first. So that's just one particular way. So with your clients, getting their work out there too, I think that another thing that can happen is that we are always going to dream big. We have high aspirations, and we imagine, take for like a membership site before. Take like a membership site. You might imagine all these amazing features on this membership site, and you got to think through how all these different things are going to go together. And you can think about that forever, but you're never going to actually get the motivation to work out all those details if it's not out there living. So finding a way to scale back, to be a little bit lean with it, not only saves you time and energy because you end up making decisions and building things that nobody needs, but it also is a motivational tool because you get the stuff out there and you scale it back. You make half a product, not a half-ass product, as Jason Fried would say. And that somehow creates some energy. And once you get through that wall of shipping, everything changes. I mean, it's uncomfortable, right? Every time I'm putting a blog post out there, every time I'm putting a podcast out there, I'm like, oh, such and such thing is just not right. And I've learned to find it freeing. I've learned to go towards that fear. So I don't know if you have any experience, when you're trying to get these clients to get that work out there, what do you usually say to them? Are you ever able to convince them?
Oh, sometimes. It's interesting because I loved what you just said about the membership. I'm actually about to work with another client on this, and she'll be fine. But I have had clients, and I love what you say because they want to focus so much on features, and it's actually not that they're trying to build the best membership site, which they are. But I believe the real core resistance, and I'm the same, I'm a Pressfield fan, I think the real core resistance is that fear of marketing and putting it out there and possibly getting rejection. And so I push with people a lot that, that minimum viable product. Get 10 posts out there and see if anybody's interested in this private area, what they're interested in. Use them as your springboard for the future of what they want to see. But you could spend 10 years building and building and building and building and building just because it's scarier to put it out there and to actually, it's like people who write books that are never published. And it used to be able to be an excuse. Well, I couldn't find a publisher, but we know now, and I loved your interview with Seth Godin talking about publishing, is there's no excuse not to publish anymore.
Right.
We get Kindle and Amazon, and there is no reason not to publish anymore. You don't have to wait for someone else to validate you.
Mm-hmm. And I think these are kind of two of the same things with the publishing or the membership site, is that it's very easy to get focused on. Yeah, it's great to have features in your membership site. It's great to have it being fully functional and stuff. But what is a membership site really? A membership site really is about the people. And if you get a good community going, they'll put up with it not being perfect, but it needs to help them in some way. And so it's concentrating on that. That's what people need to focus on. And which is going to be worse? Working on something for a year, 2 years, trying to tweak every little thing and launching it and finding out nobody cares at all, or having something that's a little lean to start with, and you're like, okay, well, we're starting where we are, and
Yeah.
we're working on top of that, and we're yes-anding, we're improvising here, and
Yes.
that is not only more motivating, it is less painful as well, but you do have to be willing to get that kind of feedback. It really is what it is like putting it out there, knowing that it's not what you ultimately expect it to become, and responding to what happens after that.
I love that. And if anybody has never taken an has not taken an improv class, David talked about yes and that's kind of the core of improv. If you're going to be any type of creator, I recommend you take a class. You don't have to be a professional. You don't have to become a professional improv person, but you will learn so much from that yes and idea, and you can tie it back into yourself on, what I push my people for is get out there and create value and put it out there and let it go and learn as you go. Whether it's a membership site or a course or a book even.
I agree about this improv thing. I took some improv classes as well, and that has been a very valuable learning experience. I think primarily one of the things that happens is you get up in front of the class and you're supposed to do a scene with somebody, and you can't think of anything to do, and maybe you do a scene that's really terrible and you're a little embarrassed, but you go sit down and eventually you realize, oh, I didn't burst into flames, I didn't disintegrate into dust. But I learned something. And so there's something about that process, which is exactly what it feels like to put blog posts out there and have them become duds, which I've written plenty of blog posts that are complete duds that I thought were going to be great, that nobody cared about, or where I was wrong about something entirely and somebody pointed it out. But it's all a part of the process of being able to exercise that sort of vision muscle where, I was talking to a rock star turned filmmaker, and he was talking about his first film, and he was saying that as a musician he can envision an album from the top down. He knows what exactly every little step that needs to go into making an album happen. And so that vision muscle, that ability to envision an outcome and then be able to follow the steps to make that outcome happen, is something that he was able to carry over into making his first film. There's always going to be unexpected things, but there's skills transfer in that way. And that's why I always say that if you're somebody who wants to create things and you're having trouble creating things, I think that it's useful to exercise that vision muscle in whatever way you can, whether that is, okay, I'm going to look up a recipe online and I'm going to make a shopping list and I'm going to plan things out and I'm going to make this recipe happen. I'm going to invite a friend over. I'm going to create this experience. I'm going to create a thing that is coming from my own volition, and I'm going to envision the outcome and I'm going to follow steps to make it happen. And some of it's not going to work out right. You're going to burn the pasta or something like that. And
yes, you will.
You're going to take what you learned and you're going to do it the next time. Those skills transfer to any creative endeavor. And so I think that just getting comfortable with the process, because this isn't something that we're taught in school. We're taught like, here's the answer, follow these steps, you're going to get to the answer. You're going to get this grade, and follow these steps, you're going to get the degree, you're going to get the job. The world doesn't work that way anymore. Maybe for some people, but if you want to survive in this world, you need to know how to make something that didn't exist before, and you need to know how to make it in an extremely uncertain environment where things are changing all the time and where what you're doing is something nobody has ever done before. And so I think that is a mindset to continue to cultivate in whatever you can, is thinking about how to create something that didn't exist before and how to envision it and see how well your outcome lines up with the vision that you had before you started. And starting small with that. Like a recipe. Vacation.
Great stuff.
That sounds great. We're going to go for our break, folks, and we'll be back in a few moments. We're coming back, folks. We've had a great discussion with David. David, this is going to be a little bit of a long-winded question. Surprise, surprise. But I've been thinking about this for a little while. Around design, in some ways, design seems to have become, especially when it comes to website design, seems to have become a real commodity. Also, with design in general, the lower to medium end of the market, it seems to have become very commoditized. But on the other hand, just got a feeling, especially when it comes to UX design and also in design in general, that design in some ways, I feel that it's going to become increasingly important. So I'm kind of pushed two ways about, is the market very fragmented and it's going in different directions? Or basically, can you give some advice and insight, David? I thought you were the right guy to ask this question.
I mean, here's what I think about it is I'm kind of a recovering designer. I got my degree in graphic design. I was obsessed with design, and I worked as a designer for a very long time, and still do the design in my own company. But what do designers love to do? We love to complain about, this font's bad, or that font's bad, or this client is like this, or nobody appreciates what we do. And people are appreciating more and more and more. People are catching on, which is great. But we need to think about what do we contribute as business people to our clients, or that's just one thing. What do we contribute? So if there are systems that are going out there like themes and stock photography, stock illustration, all these things that make it easy to make a design that looks good. And yeah, maybe it's not the perfect design, but it is, it serves the purpose from a business standpoint. And so since design is becoming so important, people are starting to appreciate it more. It's starting to become like a requirement of doing business is to have a decent design. I think designers are at an advantage that they sometimes miss, which is that they understand how they can create value from thin air, and there's also this way of thinking that goes into design that is also very valuable. And I think that, you shouldn't just be a designer for clients. I think that we should all be thinking about ways that we can create our own things, to be creative entrepreneurs, to write books or create an app or create the membership site. So thinking like business people, using our design thinking skills of like, how do we create something that somebody wants and that solves some kind of a problem for them. And so that's why I think that a lot of designers can easily miss as they're worrying about design, or worrying about rates crumbling or going down, things like that. It's like, well, look at this amazing power that you have. Look at this as an opportunity to take control of your own destiny and create something of your own. And you have this amazing power to make something look beautiful and to make an impression on people, and then also to think like a designer in a way that you can make a product that meets the needs of somebody.
Yeah, great answer. I think I wasn't totally sure where you were going with your answer. I just want to clarify this.
Sure.
I thought originally you were saying that mix it up a bit, work with clients, but also have your own projects. And by working on your own projects, you will then learn a lot more, be able to offer a lot more insight to those clients that you still work with. And in some ways, you might build up more empathy for the client that you're working with, because you've gone through a similar process through your own work.
I mean, I think that works, but I'm personally, I personally prefer to try to find my way out of working with clients.
Yes, that's why.
Like
That's why.
create my
Yeah,
own
because
thing.
you took it. Then you took it to the next stage where you were saying that you actually feel that you should move it to mostly to your own work and not work with clients. That you
Well,
think.
I think I think that's one way of doing it. I'm just speaking for myself and a lot of designers that I've talked to who don't feel they don't enjoy working with clients a whole lot. Like they're not necessarily that's not necessarily their calling. Now, some people love that, and some people love to serve their clients, and then that's where I think that it's useful to think of yourself more as a trusted consultant than a designer, right? If design is a commodity, how can you take what you're doing and solve your client's problem in a more holistic manner? And that's where I think that, someone like Brennan Dunn, I don't know if you've had him on the show, but he really thinks about this really well, about how to sell yourself not so much as, I'm just a widget maker, but I'm going to help you with your entire business here. And then then you can start commanding a higher rate. That's not something that I personally, that's not my core, but I know that if I were somebody who really did get satisfaction out of working with clients, I would start looking in that direction.
I also think. I just sense that almost a golden age of design is almost there. That a real that the actual technology side is increasingly, in some ways, becoming easier. And then business outsourcing, there's only so far you can take that. Business is always looking for the cutting edge, and I think that cutting edge of individuality, of market fit, is increasingly going to resonate with design. What do you think about that, David?
I think that you're talking about are you talking about kind of hitting a niche or hitting, your sort of the idea that average is over, right? So if you want to be the best at something, at one thing, then good luck with that, because you're competing against the entire world now. You're not just competing with whoever it is that's in the same town. Like when Facebook bought Instagram for, what was it, $1 billion for 13 employees, they weren't looking for the second best photo sharing app. They were looking for the best photo sharing app. And so I think that's called like a competitive striver, is what the economist Tyler Cowen calls these people, is somebody who they want to be the best at something. They always want more. And those people are in big trouble in this age, because there's always somebody out there who's better than you at this one thing. There's always somebody out there who has more. You're going to feel bad about yourself. But now if you're an enthusiast is what he calls it, is somebody who has a niche interest or a combination of interests. Well, then you can take combinations of interests and be the only person who does that thing. Case in point for myself is that I really loved, growing up, I really loved drawing. I also really loved computers. I was on the internet in the 90s. Those two things had nothing to do with each other. Eventually I became a web designer. And then on the side, I started a blog. Those things didn't really have that much to do with each other. I worked in Silicon Valley and got exposed to entrepreneurship. Those things were kind of unrelated. Then eventually one day, I got a book deal to write my first book, Design for Hackers, and my life and career totally changed from that thing. And, not that there's not a lot of great web design books out there, but there's not one out there just like mine. And my way of doing it really resonates with some people. Some people not so much, but some other people, it really resonates with them. And I think that's the opportunity that we have. And I think that is our big challenge in crisis, is that we aren't really armed with the skills to figure out, what is it that I have? Like, what's my one thing that only I can do that I can turn into some kind of an entrepreneurial endeavor? And that's a tough soul searching process that is completely at odds with the way that the world used to work. It used to be you jump through the hoops, you go through this thing, you get the certification, and okay, now you're an accountant, now you're a lawyer, now you're a doctor. But if you're looking to create something, you're looking to find your own voice, the one thing that only you can do, and make that into some kind of a living for yourself, a sustainable living for yourself, and not just financially, but also also just personally, as well as from a satisfaction standpoint, loving your work. That's not as straightforward of a process. We need to figure that out. That's what I'm trying to figure out.
Oh, I just love it, David. Thank you so much for that insight. We're going to wrap up the podcast part of the show. David's agreed to stay on for a little while. We're going to be talking about another of his books about blockchain and about how he feels, and I agree with him, is going to change the world in some ways. My co-host Kim just got off a flight, a business trip, and her phone overheated and she had to leave the show. And also I think she was doing it from Florida, and I think she was melted in front of us as well. But she wanted to join the conversation because she's a great fan of David. So hopefully she'll be back next week, folks. So, David, how can people learn more about what you're up to and more about you in general, David?
Oh, thank you so much, Jonathan. I'm really active on Twitter at Kadavy. I have a podcast. It is called Love Your Work. You can find that anywhere that you look, that you get your podcasts. Website is kadavy.net. It's where you can find the podcast, the books. And if any people are interested in, I've got lots of calls to actions here. So I've got a free design course at designforhackers.com for anybody who's looking to learn some basics on design. And if for anybody out there who's an aspiring writer looking to increase their creative output, I have a list of tools at kadavy.net/tools.
Oh, that's great. And folks, if you want to learn more about WP-Tonic, go to our website. We've got some great resources about if you want to build that course, great advice. We've got some great articles that we wrote this month about different choices of technology. We've just got some great resources on the WP-Tonic website. So we're going to wrap up the show this week, folks. If you really want to support the show also, go to iTunes and give us a review, good, bad, or indifferent. I just love reviews, and it just really helps the show, and it's great feedback as well. So we're going to wrap up the show, and hopefully next week we're going to have somebody doing something really fantastic with WordPress, online internet, or just somebody in general that we feel is really interesting and would offer some great insight to you, the listener and viewer. We'll see you next week, folks. Bye. Right, on to bonus content, David. So blockchain. So
Yes.
What's your book about, and what's the general overview of where you think this is all going, David?
Sure. So I have a book. It's called Make Money Writing on the Steam Blockchain. And I have made, in the last 18 months, I have cashed out into US dollars $4,000 for my writing. That might not sound like a lot. That might sound like a lot. But the most amazing thing is nobody paid me a cent to read my writing. And so how does that work? So that's kind of a little bit of what I explain in the book, but I'm happy to explain it more here on the show. I think of it this way. When you are using a site like, say, Facebook, you're working for Facebook. You know, Facebook has no value without what you contribute to Facebook. You make posts, you curate content by commenting, or you upvote content, or you add to the content by commenting. You go into the group and you share your knowledge. Facebook is worth nothing without that. Now, how does Facebook get compensation? Your compensation from Facebook is simply your enjoyment of Facebook. Facebook, has to maintain their website. They deserve some sort of compensation for that, but it's kind of a closed system. Money goes in from advertisers. Money does not go out to the people who are contributing to Facebook. So I think of Steam, which is the blockchain on which a site called Steemit is built, is I think of it like this: like Facebook is digital sharecropping, and Steam is the community garden where you can harvest the vegetables and you can go sell some of the vegetables on the farmer's market. Um, the Steam blockchain is so Facebook has all their information on a centralized database. They control that database. They can delete things if they want, and they control all that. But a blockchain is different, right? So blockchain is basically a database that there's computers all over the world that agree that this thing happened, and that's the database. And so when you use a site like Steemit, every time you comment, every time you upvote, every time you post, you are mining a cryptocurrency. The same way you hear about Bitcoin being mined by these huge computers that are just burning a ton of electricity and throwing hash power at the network to mine a coin. With Steemit, the coins are being mined when people are taking actions on the network, just like they might have, like they might do on Facebook. And so that allows little sections of these coins or little fragments of these coins to be distributed to people according to their contribution. So if I post something on Steemit and people really like it and a bunch of people upvote it, well, some of the early upvoters, they're going to get a little piece of it. Like, think of it like, I don't know if you've ever really liked a musical artist and you go to their first couple concerts and it's nice and comfortable. There's not a lot of people there. And then eventually you try to go to their concert and it's sold out and you can't even get in. And you're kind of happy for them, but you also feel a little jealous or a little bit of pit in your stomach, like there's something missing. It's because you deserve some compensation as one of the early fans who was telling people. So it can be the same way with posts on a website. Now, where does the value come from? Why are these tokens that are distributed worth anything at all? Well, they have some value within the network. They can be used to promote posts, and also having a lot of Steam tokens makes it so you earn more, you have more influence within the network. And then also outside of that, there is the speculation from investors. These coins are traded on the open market. And so that is the basics of how this works. And I think it really has an opportunity to completely change the equation in how media works, because we've seen things happening with this sort of ad-supported Facebook model, which is really about mining user data. It's about trying to keep people on the website and get their attention so that the eyeballs can be sold off to advertisers. These are the incentives that make it so that there's clickbait headlines, because if the headline doesn't match what is in the article, it doesn't really matter. Your eyeballs are on the page, and now we can sell them off to advertisers. And that's how you get things. Then it goes further to things like fake news, where if it's just all about page views and it's all about getting the attention, it doesn't have anything to do with actually creating value, then that's what you end up with. Now, how exactly are these incentives going to work out with something like Steemit? I don't know for sure. Nobody really does. We can only watch and see what happens, but it's going to be different. And so far, it already is different. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to that. I hope I didn't go on too long.
No, it's quite fascinating because I was listening to Sam Harris on his podcast, Waking Up, and unfortunately I forgot the gentleman he was interviewing, but he has announced that he is going to be a candidate for president of the US of America, and one of his core philosophies is the universal.
Kanye West.
It's the universal wage, giving a flat amount of money to everybody. Mm-hmm. So they have not so generous that they don't have to do any other type of work, but combining some part-time work with this universal credit. And he was talking about blockchain in similar terms to what you've just described, actually, about encouraging more local involvement and democratizing increasingly centralized digital economy, really.
Yeah, I mean it's a big issue, the centralization of power into there's just a few companies that are really running most of the internet, and that's the way it is. I'm not trying to say that it's evil or anything. It's just it's not working out for a lot of people. And a lot of it is because of the way that value flows from one place to another. It's kind of difficult to get value to flow. Like imagine if Facebook wanted to compensate all of their users for what they contributed to the network, it would be a nightmare. I mean, there would be, how do we get this money from this country's banking system to that country's banking system? And we're only going to have a little bit here and there. There'd be all sorts of fraud. It would take forever to make those payments happen. And then on top of it, Facebook is Facebook is owned by people. I own some Facebook. It's a publicly traded company, and they have to protect the interests of the investors. And so Facebook actually is reportedly working on a blockchain. I would imagine that they're looking into some kind of token system. This is just speculation. They're looking into some kind of token system like this. But making a switch like that from a company that is centralized database native to a company that is decentralized blockchain while being a publicly traded company, I don't know. I think that's good. That's pretty tough. So I think that Facebook should be worried. I think maybe not Steam it, but I feel like something like this is just really going to turn their world upside down eventually.
Well, I was looking at another. It was on this week on another podcast this week in startups a few weeks ago. Another gentleman, I can't remember the name, but he was one of the founders of Mozilla browser, and he started a new browser called Brave with some.
Yes.
And there you,
Brendan Ike.
Yes, I think so.
Inventor of JavaScript.
That's right. And he, there's the anonymous browsing element of it, but also he's pushing this blockchain digital payment system that's at the heart of Brave as well. So I think you're in the right spot at the right moment, because there seems to be some really bright people interested in this quite deeply, doesn't there?
I mean, there's all these different ways that creators can get paid, and they're experimenting with. What you mentioned, Brave, they have the basic attention token, which is a cryptocurrency that basically you can, I think you can buy $5 a month worth of this token, and as you visit websites, it's distributing these tokens to these websites. Once the website doesn't even have to be signed up. Once it gets up to a certain level of tokens, they get paid those tokens. And then there's also, they protect your personal data and block ads and all those things. But then there's also things like Patreon going on, where it's like voluntarily, I've got Patreon supporters. It's great. I mean, I was a little skeptical of Patreon to start with, to be honest, because it does rely upon these people to pay for something that they don't have to pay for. You have this idea of the tragedy of the commons in economics, and people are making money from Patreon. Is it going to be the thing? I'm not sure. Another thing is all this self-publishing I'm doing. I've self-published 3 books in the last 6 months, and I think and some of these are short books. Like, I've got one book that's the Steam book is 4,000 words. The How to Write a Book is 7,000 words. These are available for free as blog posts, but they're also available on paperback. They're available on Kindle. And, the Kindle is sort of a paid web browser. There's no ads on it. It's a nice reading experience. You can highlight things, and everything goes into your cloud. And so it's worth paying a couple bucks to get some good information like that, instead of having to read it on your browser. So I think that is another way.
Are you going to have them on?
Yeah.
Are you going to have them on audiobooks?
Oh, they are on audiobooks. Yeah, they're all on audiobooks. I've got a podcast, so I know how to do the audiobook. So they're all on Audible as well, right? Yeah, I forgot to mention that part.
Because I suffer from a bit of dyslexia, so I listen to all my stuff.
Better to listen. Oh, so many people prefer to listen, and in some cases because they're occupied, they're driving or something, or they don't want to sit and read it, but they want to hear it, and I guess there is AI speech going on where something can read a blog post to you. I don't know exactly what service someone might use for that, but I understand the technology exists. But is that as enjoyable as hearing a professional read this thing to you? And so audiobooks are already great. So, publishing a book is really not a lot harder than publishing a blog post. And so I think that is something that I'm really pushing for, is for more creators who are doing a lot of writing, who are writing great information, to go ahead and publish these things as books.
David, it's been an immense pleasure talking to you. I could continue the discussion a lot longer. You have to, hopefully you will agree to come back on the show at some stage. I really have immensely enjoyed our discussion. We're going to wrap up the show now, folks, and we'll be back next week with a great interview that will hopefully offer you some great insights about a specific area of the internet. We'll see you soon, folks. Bye.
Thank you, Jonathan.